When I got back from the funding trip, the parking lot for Valkyrie Studios was empty. My logo, the brushed steel Valkyrie wing I designed myself, was gone from the wall, just for Rav. Rusting bolt holes were left. My uncle, Robert, stood by the glass doors with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. My cousin, Ryan, was leaning against his brand new sports car, like he owned the place. Back early, Ilara, Robert said. Ryan just grinned, spinning his new keys. Bad news. Genius, he said, his voice dripping with pleasure. You don't work here anymore. Have you ever felt like an outsider in the very legacy you built? Let me know your story down in the comments. They were waiting for a reaction. They had rehearsed for this moment. They were expecting screams. They were prepared for tears, for begging. Ryan, especially, he had his script ready, his face set in that perfect mask of smug pity. But I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe heavily. I just stared at those 4 empty holes in the wall, the ghost of my logo. And then I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a technical smile. The kind of smile a coder gives when they've been chasing a critical bug for 3 days, only to realize the error isn't in the new code. It's in the original architecture, a bug they didn't write. But now, finally, they know exactly how to fix it. Ryan's smirk evaporated. He physically took a step back. What's so funny? My Uncle Robert's eyes narrowed. The forced smile was gone, replaced by genuine confusion. This wasn't in their plan. My reaction was a variable they hadn't accounted for. Nothing, I said, my voice quiet. I'm just realizing how poetic this all is. Poetic, Ryan scoffed, trying to get his swagger back. He thinks you're poetic, you're homeless. Maybe, I said, but this didn't start today. This started 8 months ago. At Thanksgiving, the whole family was there, gathered in my studio's conference room because my apartment was too small. I'd paid for the catering. I always paid. After the meal, Ryan cornered me, his eyes already red. The performance had begun. He was crying about his debts again. Another once-in-a-lifetime crypto scheme. Another bad investment. Another series of terrible decisions. He owed $40,000. This time, I'd already paid his gambling debts twice before, but this was the big one. I'm ruined. Ilara, he whispered, the fake tears rolling right on cue. They're going to break my legs. I looked over at my Uncle Robert, my father's brother. He just stared at his plate, nursing his drink. I paid it. I made a quiet wire transfer of $40,000 the next morning. I didn't do it to save Ryan. I did it to save my uncle the embarrassment. I did it because that's what I always did. I was the family's silent investor, the one who kept the whole broken machine running. I told Robert it was the last time. This is it, I said to him, my voice firm. No more. He just nodded, avoiding my eyes. Family helps family. Ilara, he mumbled. You know that. And as I stood there in the empty parking lot, staring at the man who'd just stolen my company, I realized he was right. Family does help family. They just never specified which family member was supposed to benefit. I looked at my Uncle Robert, standing there in the parking lot. The man who had promised my dying father he would look out for me. And as he avoided my gaze, just like he did at that Thanksgiving dinner, I finally understood the truth. Love doesn't just blind you. Sometimes it rots. There's a deep psychology to it. The profile of the enabler. My Uncle Robert had spent Ryan's entire life cleaning up his messes, paying off bookies, placating angry girlfriends, making excuses. He wasn't protecting his son from failure anymore. He was protecting the failure as if it was his son. And in that toxic dynamic, to save Ryan, the perpetual failure, he had to sacrifice me. The one who was succeeding. My success just made Ryan's failures look worse. His love wasn't nourishment anymore. It was a toxic complicity, a rot that had eaten away the man my father trusted. My smile, that quiet, technical smile, must have really bothered them. It wasn't in their script. When they get confused, they get cruel. Poetic Ryan sneered, his voice cracking. You're about to be poetically broke. Ilarda. We sold Valkyrie. My Uncle Robert cleared his throat, puffing his chest out, trying to regain his authority. That's right, he said, in a sickeningly paternal tone. We had a board meeting. A board meeting, I thought. The two of you, in the break room. It was time. Robert continued, to let people with real business experience take the reins. We've sold the company. We got $2.5 million. Ryan blurted out, unable to hold it in. He said the number like it was a weapon, designed to kill me right where I stood. Cash in hand. Cousin, enough to pay off my debts and leave a pretty nice chunk left over. Thanks for, building it for us. He grinned. That parasitic, triumphant grin. They stood there, the two of them, framed by the empty bolt holes where my logo used to be. They had just confessed to the crime. They had just laid out their entire pathetic disparity motive. And they were waiting for me to shatter. This was the blow they thought I could never recover from. They thought they had finally, definitively, won. I nodded slowly, letting their words hang in the air, savoring the weight of that $2.5 million boast. Ryan's chest was puffed out. My Uncle Robert looked proud. They had done it. They had finally put the genius in her place. $2.5 million. I repeated, my voice even. A good price. Ryan barked out a laugh. Good, it's a steal. Cousin. Yes, my uncle said, straightening his tie, eager to add the final, professional nail in my coffin. The buyer. Mr. V. Marcus. I interrupted. The air in the parking lot, which had been so breezy and cold, suddenly went perfectly still. Ryan's laugh died in his throat. My uncle's mouth hung open. Mid-word. His name is Marcus, I said, looking right at Robert. I know. I recommended him. Silence. The kind of silence that has a sound. A high-pitched, ringing. Digital air. Their smiles were frozen, like a video feed that had just buffered. Ryan's face, which had been so full of smugness, was now a blank mask of confusion. You? What, you're bluffing? Am I asked. I took a small breath. It started 8 months ago. Robert, when I paid Ryan's $40,000 last time debt, my compassion had been a luxury they'd overdrafted for years. This wasn't revenge. It was accounting. I had a gut feeling. I continued. But as a coder, I don't trust gut feelings. I trust data. So, I set an alert. A simple script, buried deep in the server's admin logs. It would ping my phone if any high-level administrative changes were made to the company's legal structure. I looked at Ryan, You were asleep. It was 2:15 a.m. 6 months ago. I looked at Robert. My phone lit up. An access request, followed by a file upload to the corporate registry. I made myself a cup of coffee, and I sat down to look. It was a digital power of attorney, I said, my voice clinical, filed with the state, granting you, Robert, full signatory rights over all company assets, allowing you to act as sole owner in any transaction. And at the bottom, I finished, was my signature. A very, very good forgery, but not good enough. You used a JPEG of my signature from the last annual report. You forgot that on legal documents, my digital signature is tied to a blockchain security key. You forged a like. Ilara. You needed an is. Ilara. A rookie mistake? Ryan was white as a sheet. I don't know what you're talking about. My Uncle Robert, however, knew. He had gone from smug to confused to afraid. He knew exactly what I was talking about. I didn't confront them. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The warmth just left me. There is a special, profound loneliness reserved for the burden bearer in a family. It's that precise moment you realize you are, and have always been, the only safety net, and there is absolutely no one holding a safety net for you. You're the only one paddling the boat. Everyone else is just an anchor. Finding that forged signature wasn't a shock. It wasn't even, really, a betrayal. It was a confirmation. It was the system finally returning the error message I always knew was there. And it wasn't a breakdown. It was permission to finally cut the rope and save myself. So, I didn't get angry. I got clinical. I became a silent coder. I observed. I let them think I was gone on my funding trip. But I was in every log, every back-end file. I watched them through the admin access they didn't know I still had. I saw the frantic emails, the panicked calls. I watched them meet with 3 different buyers, all of whom saw the clumsy, desperate forgery for what it was and walked away. They were getting sloppy. They thought they were so clever, whispering in the conference room, forgetting that I owned the cloud subscription for the security cameras. They were getting desperate. Ryan needed his $150,000. And then, a 4th buyer magically appeared. Mr. Marcus, a private investor, who was very interested in their opportunity. Ryan's face in the parking lot was ashen. You knew Marcus. Robert. I said, Ryan, you've never met my chief financial officer. Have you? I let that hang in the air. Marcus has been with me for 10 years. He's the only person on this planet I trust with my real numbers. When I showed him the forged signature 6 months ago, he took it very, very personally. I looked at Ryan. You didn't find Marcus. Ryan, Marcus found you. That unbeatable offshore investment tip that cost you $150,000, the one that started this whole desperate fire sale, that was Marcus feeding you the bait. He created the debt, he created the crisis, and then he just waited for you to come knocking, with my uncle's fraudulent signature in your hand. My Uncle Robert looked like he was going to be sick. The enabler, the fool, you gamed us, he whispered, his voice thin. You gamed yourselves, I said, the coldness finally coming into my voice. I just built the engine to watch you do it. You. You set us up, Robert finally whispered, his voice trembling. The enabler. The patriarch. Suddenly looking like a lost child. You set yourselves up, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the steel on the wall. I just ran the diagnostics on your failure. You don't get it, I said, almost gently. You never did. You think Valkyrie is this building, these desks, this carpet I kicked at the floor. This is just a box. My father left me a legacy. Robert. And you thought it was a house you could sell. Ryan was hyperventilating, looking from me to his father. What is she talking about, Dad? What is she talking about? We have the money. Do you? I asked. Let me explain the code. 6 months ago, after I found your forgery, I did a little administrative work. I created a new entity, Valkyrie Holdings, LLC. It sounds almost identical to Valkyrie Studios, Inc. Doesn't it very easy to get the two confused, especially if you're not paying attention? I transferred the lease for this building, the box, to Valkyrie Holdings. I also transferred all the physical asset, the desks, the chairs, the old server racks in the basement, everything you are looking at. Robert's face went a shade of gray I'd never seen before. He was finally understanding. But the code? Ryan stammered, his eyes wide with panic. The game, the IP, that's worth hundreds of millions. I finished for him. Correct. And where is it? Ryan. He looked around wildly. As if the code was a physical thing he could see. It's not here, I said. 2 months ago, I migrated the entire source code, every line, every patent, every single asset that is Valkyrie Studios to a new, private, encrypted server, Valkyria Studios, Inc. The real company no longer resides at this address. It hasn't for 60 days. I took a step closer. What you sold to Marcus for $2.5 million was an empty shell company that owns a building lease and a room full of used furniture. You didn't sell the diamond. You sold the empty box. You sold the void. That's the art of your deal. You're lying, Ryan shrieked, his voice cracking. You're lying, Robert. Tell her she's lying. I just looked at him. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Lying, I asked. I pressed play. My own phone. Playing a recording from their conference room 2 weeks ago. Ryan's voice, loud and clear. She'll lose everything. It's about time. Let her cry. She's always been a freak with her computers, anyway. Followed by Robert's gravelly laugh. She'll thank us, one day. Son, this is for her own good. Their voices filled the empty, cold parking lot. Ryan stopped breathing. You recorded every word, Robert whispered. The blood had drained from his face. Of course, I said. Data is king. I wasn't finished. And that $2.5 million you're clinging to, I said, looking at Ryan, that cash in hand. It wasn't from Marcus. It was from Valkyrie Holdings, which, as I established, I control. The transfer was made from my account through Marcus to yours. I held up my phone, showing them the bank transfer confirmation I had saved. It's not a payout. Ryan, I said, it's a receipt, a legal, documented. Non-repudiable paper trail. The bank transaction notes, which I'm sure you didn't read, clearly state, payment for attempted fraudulent sale of assets. The money isn't your victory. It's my evidence. It's your confession. Signed, sealed, and delivered. Robert's whole body was shaking. He looked from the phone to the recordings, to the bank transfer. He looked at his son, who was just muttering, "No, no, no." "Elara?" Robert whispered, his voice a dry rasp. He tried to take a step toward me. A pathetic, pleading gesture. "Elara, please. You can't. You wouldn't. You can't send your own family to jail." I looked at him. The enabler, the fool, the man who held the match while his son lit the fire. And now he was crying because the smoke was burning his eyes. "I'm not," I said, my voice flat. "My lawyer is. I just compiled the data." I put my phone back in my pocket. "You committed digital forgery. You committed wire fraud. You conspired to steal a corporation. Those aren't family squabbles, Robert. Those are federal crimes. I didn't make the law. I just finally decided to use it." As if on cue, a silent, blue and red light pulsed against the side of the building. A police car, moving with no siren, just purpose, rolled into the parking lot. Ryan saw it and made a small, strangled sound. I didn't stay to watch. I didn't need to see them in handcuffs. I didn't need their apologies, which I knew would be just as fake as their outrage. I turned and walked past them, toward the main entrance. We're all taught that blood is unbreakable. That family is a bond you can't sever. No matter how toxic, no matter how much it hurts. But we're wrong. Sometimes, the relationships we're born into aren't a sanctuary. They're a prison. They're a weight designed to keep us from becoming who we're meant to be. Walking away from them, hearing the car door open behind me, I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel regret. I felt light. This wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of liberation. It was the final, clinical acknowledgement that to save my future, I had to be willing to surgically remove my toxic past. It doesn't matter what last name it has. I took the elevator, not to my old office, but to the 20th floor, to an unmarked, gray door at the end of the hall. I swiped my keycard. The lock clicked open. Inside, it was cold. A quiet, steady hum filled the air. Rows and rows of black servers, pulsing with quiet. Blue lights. This was it. Valkyrie Aegis server. The real company. The soul. My father's legacy. Safe in a digital fortress. I sat down on the cold, raised floor. Leaning my back against the humming rack, I wasn't smiling anymore. I didn't need to. I just closed my eyes. And for the first time in 8 months, I breathed. It was the quiet, clean air of a system that had finally, perfectly, rebooted. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a line of perfect code, executing exactly as it was designed. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch, share your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that sometimes the most powerful and most necessary act in the world is hitting delete.